Introducing Rodrigo Sierra.
I wrote down that you are the habitat restoration specialist with the Santa Lucia Preserve in Carmel Valley and are very involved with restoration,
Yeah.
enhancement of the habitat. Is that accurate, or could you tell me a little
No,
more of what your title is and what do you do?
yes, my title has been evolved being in the from since I started till now. So I started as the grassland ecologist for the Santa Lucia Conservancy, and currently I am the director of stewardship. So pretty much directing all our efforts on environmental management, kind of like restoration and everything nature related that we need to use our hands to improve or to maintain. That's me.
Wonderful. That sounds great. And where were
Okay.
you raised and where do you live now and what brought you to Monterey County?
I'm a full-on, or I was a full-on city kid. I'm from Central Mexico. There's like a very nice old colonial city called Querétaro in the state of Querétaro. It's like 2 hours and a half, depending how fast you drive from Mexico City. My dad was an academic at my local university. He was a writer, a poet. And then my mom was a sales agent for a chemical company. And her family came from Morelia in Michoacan. And I studied biology at my local university. In Mexico, you don't do minors or majors. You study one thing, and that's who you are at the end. So I finished biology, and then you need to do a bachelor dissertation. You don't get your degree just because you finish the credits. So I have always been kind of like attracted to the outdoors. One thing that people forget about Mexico is that we do not have public lands. Like Mexico is one of the very few countries in the world that do not have public lands. So like I think it's like less than 2% of Mexican land mass is actually owned by the government or any other federal entity. Wow. So most land is owned either by private owners, like here, like a rancher or something, or by communities, but they own the land. So there's no BLM land, there's no Forest Service land, there's no state-owned land. So that is one of the main things that prevent people from Mexico to really get this kind of like outdoor recreation connection to the land. So we don't have, the reason why you cannot find a trail map for Mexico is because we don't have official places to go and do hikes. If you're from the city, chances are that you have never been in the outdoors beyond like a little place where you can go and have like breakfast and play some soccer and kind of like walk around. But there's not this kind of like, oh, I'm going to do backpacking in Mexico. It's a thing that we just don't do because the access to the land is not granted in some way. For me, studying biology was kind of like that pathway to get into the great. So anyway, like I was finishing my degree. I was really into like saving the whales and go to the rainforest. And we were doing some like small projects in my hometown. We were like traveling through all the places and doing like floristic surveys and collecting cacti and like going to look for lizards and snakes and all that. So we started kind of like just touring around my home state. And I ended enrolled in a neurobiology lab in the National University to do my bachelor dissertation. And suddenly I'm like working with like DNA and searching for stuff in like optic nerve. Like it was fun, but it was just like, you know, like the lab stuff. So this new researcher arrived to my university, and he had some projects in northern Mexico, in Sonora and Chihuahua, working with big mammals like black bears and jaguars and mountain lions. And I was like, oh, this is what I was looking for. So I stopped. I leave that lab. So I told them like, you know, this is not for me. So I moved for a year to northern Mexico to some private ranches in the middle of nowhere with nothing around you. Like it's you, your colleagues. I mean, we're like 4 friends doing our dissertations there. And suddenly we're like looking for all the carnivore community. in that area. So that was kind of like when I was like, oh, this is amazing. I mean, like being out and all the wildlife stuff, like it's
Yeah.
all wide open and big landscapes and not much development. So all the wildlife is there, and in tropical Mexico, like in the south. So I went north, which is not a typical step on biologists. I think biologists always wants to go south to the tropics. And that pretty much put me at the border. Like I was living, like I can see the US from the place where I was camping or the place where I was living. Then I stopped working in that project. I joined a conservation lab at the National University in Mexico City. And then I came back like really close to where I did my bachelor dissertation to run. At the beginning, I was just like another field technician running a research station there where we were working with pretty much like, if you look at a map, the end of the Great Plains is the Chihuahuan Desert in Mexico. And if you think on species like bison and pronghorn, they used to go all the way down almost to Mexico City before we killed them all. Pretty much like I went to Janos, Chihuahua for like 15 years, first as a field technician. And in that place, we were like researching black-tailed prairie dogs and some bison populations that still cross the border. Well, and by being in the border, most of your partners are like from the two countries. So I started working with the USDA, with the US Fish and Wildlife Service, with the US Forest Service, with some other kind of like small NGOs around like environmental issues. So we're kind of like the Mexican side and we're like working with the US side. So in this lab, I started putting my PhD program together and I partnered with the USDA. The USDA has a really big research station in Las Cruces, New Mexico, the Jornada Experimental Range. So I got together with them and we put together a project to research the environmental interactions between prairie dogs and domestic livestock. So that's kind of like where I started working kind of like between Mexico and the States, kind of like that has been my life until now. And that's where I met a researcher called Nathan Sayre, who at the very early stages of my PhD, he just kind of like threw me like, would you like to come to my university sometime? And I was like, yeah, I'll go there eventually. I never asked which university he was in. Then he came back again, and my advisor at Fredrickson at the time, he was like, you should ask which university he's in, and you should say yes. And so we're having some drinks, and he was like, yeah, like if you're interested, because the thing that you are doing, it's stuff that I'm interested in their side of the border. It'd be nice to see if we can work together. So I was like, so which university you said you are in? And he's like, oh, I'm in UC Berkeley. So I was like, oh, shit, like I need to go there, right? So some years after, in 2011, I finally came as a visiting scholar to UC Berkeley, and I stayed 2011, 2012 as a visiting scholar there. And at that time, I met who now is my ex-wife, and we got in a relationship together. We got married, and pretty much that's how I ended kind of like moving to the States and landing in the Santa Lucia Conservancy. I still involved in some conservation programs in Mexico. So I think that's like
You've got hands in two pies, I guess, or two pots, or whatever that expression is. So you're relatively recent to Monterey County, then it sounds like.
Yeah, 2.5 years. I still get lost in Fort Ord every ride.
Yeah, and how long have you been enjoying the trails at the Fort Ord National Monument? Is that something that is really recent, or did you know about it when you came?
No, my first ride, one of my colleagues at the Conservancy is part of MORCA, Christy Wyckoff. So I show up to the office to work, and I told them that I mountain bike, and she was like, well, if you mountain bike, you should come to Fort Ord to one of the Wednesday rides. That was the first time ever. Like I just show up on a Wednesday ride. So like
Wonderful.
2.5 years ago, something like that.
What's your favorite type of recreation and what you like best about it?
My favorite kind of recreation, I like to move. I like hiking when I need to go somewhere. I mean, mountain biking, it's probably like my favorite thing to do on the trails, just because I feel like mountain biking, it really I think for me it's very relaxing because the only thing you can think about is what you're doing at the moment. You cannot get distracted, right? Like you get distracted, you crash. So it's an activity that really allows me to disconnect and be fully present. And I mean, one of the things that happens to me is that I work on environmental issues all the time. But mountain biking, I've been riding the 4-door trails for 2 years and a half. And if you drop me today, I would get lost like in the first 10 minutes of my ride by myself. Like, because I'm so into like be in the moment that sometimes I don't even pay attention where I'm going. So I tend to just follow. On my free time, if I have to choose, like mountain biking is kind of like in my very top priorities.
Yeah. Well, I think many of us share your same thoughts and feelings about that, of really being there. I know through many of the trail days that you volunteered a lot with Morca doing trail work. Is there any other volunteer activities that you like to do, or is that your favorite one? And if it is, why do you like to do that?
I really like trail building just because I don't know. I like to fix stuff. Like being in like ecological restoration is kind of like you want to fix and you want to build and you want to make things better. So I think like for me, trail building and trail maintenance is kind of like an extension of that true passion. Like I'm obsessed with fixing.
Yeah.
I think I want to get more into the advocacy part of outdoor recreation narrative. It's because I feel like, I mean, up to today, like you can see huge gaps on who is using the outdoors, like who has the ability to be out there. So I feel like that if I could pull a little bit more time of all the other stuff that you do as a human, I could get more into like the advocacy side of things on
Mm.
bringing more people out, and at the same time, because it's not just bringing the people out, it's kind of like creating the environment for the people to be out and be welcome and all that. So
Right. Do you have any other interests besides your work? Do you, for example, photography or design or music or whatever? Would you like to tell us anything else about what you like to do?
yeah, so I had a secret life as a photographer. Like
Mm.
I used to publish in like Mexican and some international magazines and some books, like mostly like nature photography. I like music, going to concerts and listening to like cool radio stations and finding new music. That's one thing that I keep doing. It's funny to realize that you actually work in what you love, because I feel like if you ask me like what you enjoy the most, like being out in nature. And what I like to be doing when I'm not in at work out in nature, I would like to be not at work but out in nature again. Yeah, I think that's.
Wonderful. And that sort of segues into the next question is, we know that you're the stewardship director, but can you tell us a little bit more about what your day is like? What types of things are you working on at the Santa Lucia Preserve?
Yeah, so the Santa Lucia Preserve is a 20,000 acres piece of amazing land. Half of that, half of that belongs to the Santa Lucia Conservancy as a conservation land trust. And the remaining 50%, around 40% of that land, it's under conservation easements with us. So pretty much the function of the conservancy is to manage the land that we own in the kind of to maintain and improve the ecological conditions of the land. Like there's like many endangered species, and it's an amazingly diverse spot. I mean, like the Monterrey Peninsula is just amazing, right? I mean, you can go from like the ocean to coastal grasslands all the way to old growth redwood forest in 3 miles, which
Yeah.
is like pretty striking. If you think of other California landscapes, like you have like most of the coastal, from the coast to the interior, you have them all those ecotypes in a really small space. So the preserve is like a pretty nice kind of like mash of all these super interesting ecosystems. So my work pretty much is like going from keep the grasslands and the forest and everything healthy as we can. And obviously it's not just me. Like,
Yeah.
and I've been kind of like hiking and driving and walking through this place for the last 2 years and a half, and there's still places that I haven't been. So it's super nice, super entertaining, super challenging and entertaining job.
It sounds wonderful in that it's so diverse. You aren't doing the same thing every day. It sounds like you're
Yeah.
doing something almost different every day and constantly changing and evolving. That's wonderful. And do you have any ideas of how to get more Latino people, especially the youth, interested in the outdoors?
Latinos need to be welcome in a way that they're actually welcome to be and express. Like sometimes we like to bring some music and some food and some kids that actually play. And sometimes that doesn't fit the way that you should behave in the outdoors. And it's just like a completely random rule on what you should be doing. So kind of like getting this sense of being welcome, it's very important. Creating a way that you know that Four Door has something for you, like that space can mean something for you, that you can create community in that place and be able to go and do a pic. I mean, we love picnics, but they're loud because we like to be loud. And kind of like how you create that space of it's nice for you to do your picnic and you can hike and you can do all that, but we need to be loud. So kind of like allowing for the whole culture to be there, not just the people following the trail, I guess.
Right. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Do you have any other thoughts that you would like to add?
I feel like the Morca community, it's super welcoming. I feel like every time that you have somebody new showing up into the Wednesday ride, it's treated as just another one, which is nice. And I have never feel any judgment or like harshness towards me. So and more like actually being like a very supportive, caring group. So yeah, like if people is interested in kind of like give it a try on mountain biking, I think they can find us and we can help.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rodrigo.